Hi, my name is Mel, and I'm going to be talking about ethical hacking. Now, I've probably talked about this before, but if I haven't, I'm going to cover it here. And look, this is sort of going to be an overview. I will try and cover a lot of these topics in more depth elsewhere and in future videos. So, for a start, like the EC Council has got good courses, but they do cost. Um, on ethical hacking. Geeks for Geeks have stuff, information. There's various certifications you get, some are cheaper than others. The problem is, too, that a lot of junior level jobs in IT or cybersecurity or junior level jobs, anyway, entry level jobs, have been overtaken by AI. And I have a big problem with that since I am trying to go back to work in IT and cybersecurity. But also too, there's no plan of how to retrain or how to create jobs for these people elsewhere. And there's other issues with AI. I mean, AI could be good as a tool for people to use in IT or elsewhere, but it can't replace people. And I do have a video about AI and what my problems, or what I found to be the problems with it. But anyway, so ethical hacking is basically, at its very heart, the authorized process of going around or going through or bypassing system security to identify any vulnerabilities before malicious attackers do. So, ethical hackers or penetration testing have to operate under strict legal frameworks. And so that would include non disclosure agreements with the company not to disclose any information or weaknesses you find, to do it like with express written consent of the chief information security officer and the CEO, like with very good understanding of what's going to be done. Make sure that all systems are backed up entirely before any testing goes through. Now, obviously, you might not let all the workers and users know, because depending on what you want to test, but you've got to have very clear legal, like written legal documents to do this. And ethical hackers use very identical tools and mindsets as cybercriticals, but they report weaknesses directly to organizations to help patch them. So, look, there's what's called the 5 phases of attack cycle, right? So, there's reconnaissance, or like footprinting. So, gathering initial intelligence on the target using passive methods like OSINT, or DNS records via Whois, or even just like Google or Edge browsing, or any other browser for that matter. You can look up what companies, a lot of information you can get just on like social media. You would be really probably shockingly surprised about what people give away just out there in the internet. Also, active methods, they do test social engineering, which is important because, like, in any job, and especially in security of IT and IT in general, people are the obviously the biggest security risk. And that's not to mean that everyone is malicious, of course not. But people are people. We want to help. We try and often do the best and the right things. So someone can ring up and go, hey, I've got this report due. I've got to send it. I'm going to get the sack, or I'm going to be in big trouble for so and so who's very important. I know I've forgotten my password. It's not working. Can you send me information? Can you reset my login? And you want to help. You do. And the problem is that psychology is often used. So social engineering is used by people who understand, at least very basically, how to manipulate and deceive others. And you can, like, there's phishing, there's all sorts of other, there's vishing, there's smishing, there's all sorts of techniques. And social engineering, there's a whole lot of other stuff as well. I mean, so it's really important that all companies teach their employees about social engineering. And we also, like, people, hopefully you know a lot more than I do, and anyone else for that matter who works in IT and cybersecurity. We educate people about what social engineering is and how to hopefully avoid it, either at work or at home. All right. Now, scanning. So the next phase after reconnaissance is scanning. So probing the target network for open ports. Now, ports are a software thing that computers and systems have, right, to have certain, programs and applications and protocols running on them. So it's a way of computers and systems assigning a certain amount of memory and resources to certain other processes, I guess, for lack of a better word. I'm going to do something more about ports in another video and try and sort of cover it a bit more there. So we probe open ports, live hosts, and active services. So this can identify entry points and system configurations. Gaining access. So weaponizing discovered vulnerabilities, like exploiting and executing an exploit on a known software bug, or SQL injection, or cross scripting. I mean, ransomware is still a very, very big one, especially in Australia. There's multiple other ways that, like, you can gain access, and like privilege escalation, or leveraging privileges, or lateral movement across systems, and like maintaining access, establishing stealthy persistence within the system, such as deploying custom backdoors, ensure long-term control regardless of system reboots. And then clearing tracks, erasing any digital footprints, wiping system event logs, and altering registries, but to prevent detection by internal security teams, sometimes called blue teams. Okay. So these are the 5 phases of an attack cycle. So core domains and targets. What offensive security testing is split into many distinct specialities depending on the target infrastructure, obviously. So network hacking. So this analyzes routing protocols, switches, firewalls for misconfiguration. So like all networks have got switches, they've got routers, they've got modems, blah, 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 blah. And some of these are more secure than others. A lot of them, even the more secure ones, are not fantastically secure. There's all sorts of things you can do around these sorts of things. So some of the tools could be Metasploit, Wireshark, Nmap, and that can be used for good and bad. Web applications targets injection vulnerabilities. As I said, SQL injection, cross-site scripting, and broken application program interfaces, and broken authentication. So like Burp Suite, OWASP, ZAP. So I'm going to talk about OWASP as well. WPS scan. Okay, system hacking. So you can target operating system flaws, weak passwords, local privilege escalation. Mimikatz, John the Ripper, and Hashcat. Social engineering exploits human element via manipulative phishing, smishing, pretexting, vishing. GoFish, social engineering toolkit. Yep. Wireless hacking. Test encryption vulnerabilities on like WPA2 or 3, or hopefully those, but if they're less than, they're very easily hacked. And rogue access points. Aircrack, NG, and Y Fight are some of those you can use. And also you can use IoT, Internet of Things hacking. And trust me, Internet of Things is notoriously insecure. So there's stories I could tell you that you'd make yourself want to get away from any technology for the rest of your life. So look, advanced modern disciplines. So as defense has evolved, modern ethical hacking has expanded beyond traditional penetration testing. And we've needed to, because we need to keep evolving as the threats keep evolving. And as technology and software changes constantly, we need to keep evolving our understanding of how these systems, what they do, how to protect them as best we can, you know. So red teaming is deeply adversarial, unannounced simulation testing on an organization's overall physical, technical, and human security posture. Okay, cloud and DevSecOps hacking. So auditing cloud infrastructure like AWS, Azure, and continuous improvement or integration. So continuous integration and continuous development, and pipelines for misconfigured permissions and exposed API or application program interface keys. AI-driven offensive operations, and that is a big thing. Using artificial intelligence to automate complex vulnerability scanning or to attack in a lot of cases, and not always in a good way. Generate highly deceptive phishing campaigns and quickly reverse engineer malware. Look, there are many respected certifications, and I'm not sure the career paths, because as I said, a lot of lower level, entry level has been removed. And I think that's problematic. Certified ethical hacker, okay, is a well-established, globally recognized foundational credential focusing on security concept and attack vectors. See CompTIA Pentest Plus. And I mean, these are all expensive too, which is a problem. And they don't always get you a job. And as I said, you know, this is problematic. Offensive security certified professional, and there's others as well. Okay, so I'm going to go into some sort of a little bit more advanced reconnaissance and intelligence gathering. Open source intelligence, or OSINT information. So advanced reconnaissance moves beyond basic public lookups. It focuses on mapping an organization's entire digital attack surface without altering or alerting security teams. So open source OSINT automation. Modern reconnaissance relies on programmatic data correlation to build target profiles. So infrastructure and mappings. Tools like AMAS and Subfinder leverage scraping. APIs and active brute forcing to map subdomains. They query historical DNS archives and certificate transparency logs to find forgotten, unpatched staging environments. Asset discovery. Spiderfort and Maltego automatically map relationships between domain names, net blocks, email addresses, software stacks. This exposes shadow IT assets outside the security team's awareness. And a lot of companies increasingly look at the dark web for intelligence that might threaten the company or others. So they look in the dark web, because a lot of hackers who are not nice operate in the dark web. So it's good idea for ethical security persons to go onto the dark net to search and try and find issues that might be could cause a problem. Advanced network scanning and evasion. So standard networks easily trigger modern intrusion detection systems. Advanced operators modify packets to bypass firewall rules. So in Bash, and Bash is just like script sort of command line interface sort of thing here. Nmap, you can use hyphen small s big S, which is synth stealth scan. It opens a half open connection, never completing the three-way handshake to avoid any application logging. Then you do space hyphen big P little n, which disables ICMP ping requests to bypass firewalls that block ping traffic. Okay, then you can do another space hyphen minus F space hyphen hyphen MTU 24 fragments the IP packets into tiny IP byte chunks. This splits the attack signature across multiple packets, confusing simple packet filters. And there's other stuff you can do. I'm not going to go through all of it, but Nmap is one of the many things that you can do to scan. You can do it, do timing changes and source port, data length, all sorts of stuff in that. And there's many other tools. There's NS lookup, there's netstat, MB something, I can't remember. I'll think of it in a minute, probably after I've gone past this bit. And there's a heap of other commands you can do. Obviously, a heap of tools and commands, like ARP spoofing, MAC spoofing, DNS spoofing, blah, blah, blah. You can do all sorts of things. Exploitation, depth, and privilege escalation. Once a vulnerability is found, attackers can execute precise exploit strings to gain control and lift user privileges to the highest level possible. So that there could be local privilege escalation. Initial access grants low-level user permissions. Escalating to root or system requires exploiting OS flaws, and they are there in all operating systems. Linux kernel, so kernel exploitation and misconfiguration. SUID exploitation, which is set owner user ID. So file systems often have binaries configured with the set owner user ID bit enabled. If the binary like find runs with root SUID permissions, it can execute commands, system commands as root. And I mean, you should know what you're doing before you test any of this out. You can do this in Bash, but I'm not going to tell you the code because you'll look that up yourself. It's available out there. Kernel vulnerabilities, exploiting memory corruption bugs within the Linux kernel, e.g. dirty cow, pawn kit, instantly drop a root shell. Windows, Active Directory, and LSASS. LSA, dumping. The local security authority system service manages user credentials in memory. Attackers bypass security controls to dump this memory space using tools like Mimikatz to extract clear text passwords or the NTLM password hashes. Right, and you can decrypt hashes and you can mess around with hashes and do all sorts of things. Token manipulation, stealing access tokens of an administrator process to impersonate that user and execute commands with elevated permissions. Post exploitation and pivoting. Compromising an edge server is likely only the first step. Operators use it as a jump box to reach the hopefully isolated internal network. So hopefully people have got their network segmented. Does not mean they cannot be hacked, unfortunately, because they can be. So the attacker machine might use an SSH tunnel or reverse port forward. They will attack a compromised edge web server. So double homed, which means public IP plus internal IP. Then go through the internal domain controller, which is isolated from the internet, but not isolated from the web server. Generally can't be. And you can do all sorts of things. Pivoting, setting up local proxy routes using tools like Chisel, proxy chains, or SOCAT on the compromised server. This route traffic deep into the private internal network. Okay, lateral movement, moving across internal systems like native network protocols like WinRM, WMI, SMB exec to compromise adjacent servers. And as I said, I will cover what all of this is in other videos. I'm just telling you what are some of the more advanced concepts in terms of hacking ethically, or and hopefully not otherwise, but this is what people do, whether they're ethical or not, all right, to get into systems, all right? So Active Directory infrastructure attacks. So Active Directory, this is Windows Server, okay? So Windows Server has got what's called Active Directory, and it manages permissions for enterprise networks. Compromising the Active Directory environment gives attackers a lot of control over the entire organization. So initial access could be like phishing or some kind of external exploit. And they can do things like what's called Kerbo roasting or ASREP routing, which is extracting tickets, basically extracting TGS or TGT tickets. Offline crack, so they do an offline crack. Privilege escalations, things like bloodhound graph analysis. Domain controller, golden ticket, full control. Kerber roasting, exploiting the Kerberos authentication protocol. Attackers request a service ticket, TGS, for any service account with a service principal name. And I'm going to go through all this in another video. I'm just covering it here, because parts of these tickets are encrypted with the account's password hash. The attacker can pull it out and crack it offline to get the password. ASREP roasting. Okay, targeting accounts that do not require Kerberos pre-authentication. Attackers request authentication data, ASREP response, and attempt to crack the encrypted password hash offline, and that's definitely doable. Bloodhound graph analysis, using graph theory to map hidden Active Directory relationships. Bloodhound automatically uncovers complex attack paths, either user A, member of group B, local admin on server C, session of domain admin. Golden ticket attacks, forging a fraudulent Kerberos ticket granting ticket, TGT, by capturing the long-term password hash of the KRB TGT account. This gives the attacker permanent, unconstrained domain access accounts. So then there's advanced web application and API hacking. Modern web applications use complex logic, APIs, and microservices that introduce sophisticated flaws. So there's server-side forgery, request forgery, okay? Second order SQL injection, JWT and API, so JWT and API vulnerabilities. So it's JSON Web Tokens, if you don't know what JWT, and some of the other stuff you might not know what I mean, but like we'll go through this elsewhere. Evasion and persistence and C2, okay, command and control is C2. Architectures, to simulate advanced persistent threats, ethical hackers must maintain access without triggering any endpoint detection and response, called EDR agents. Okay, beacons, jitter, there's all sorts of evasion techniques. Process injection, injecting malicious shell code directly into the memory space of trusted Windows processes like Explorer XE, SVC host.exe to hide from task manager orders. Fun. API unhooking, living off the land, and that's becoming a big one. Avoiding custom malware entirely. Instead, attackers use built-in administrative tools like PowerShell and others to do hacking or advanced methods, all right? So there's more. I mean, this you could go really in depth in this, and I'll just cover this even more briefly because, like, for people who don't have any idea what I'm talking about, I probably left them behind about half an hour ago. Um, so you got to look at sub-OS exploitation, direct memory manipulation, custom cryptographic weaponization, hyper-evasive post-exploitation. So there's hardware, firmware, and hypervisor level exploitation. And there's all sorts of complicated things you can do in that. Advanced endpoint detection and XDR, bypass and kernel level manipulation. Fun. Bring your own vulnerable driver. There's another thing there too. Direct system calls, assembly, cryptographic attack vectors, and custom Active Directory exploitation. Active Directory golden SAML attacks. So this is fun. Custom command and control architecture engineering, weaponized memory manipulation and in-memory evasion, thread stack spoofing. So I want to sort of say, look, and there's far more in-depth and more complex things. So when you were talking about like methods used that people to attack, whether ethically or otherwise, it can be from simplistic to people like, so people who are black hackers or not ethical, they're not good, they can have very little to no understanding what they're doing. They can do, like, there's very simplistic methods and tools used. You don't need a lot of knowledge to how to use, quite honestly. I'm not going to go what they are because they're easily found out, quite honestly. And to maybe a little bit more than from very bare basic knowledge to extreme depth. And the thing is, hackers often, like, there's dark web technologies and information, they often communicate with each other, even if they don't work together. Sometimes they do. There are state actors. So I think it's really important, like, if you're looking at ethical hacking and a potentially like protecting a person or persons or companies information systems and networks, you've got to look at sort of like among things of why do hackers hack, like, what are their goals? And they could be, might be more than one, and that could be simple goals to complicated goals. And because people are complex. I mean, there could be state sponsored hacks, and let's be honest, pretty much I think most governments do state sponsored hacks of other states or other companies elsewhere in other countries to get proprietary technology or ideas to try and bring other companies' systems or other countries' systems down, to find out what other countries' military or governments are up to. I think that's just honestly, and I mean that, of course, that happens. I mean, I don't particularly think it's great, but it does happen. You can have company baked, and that this happens absolutely. You can have groups that hackers that can have any, like, they could be, hacktivists, as they called, like, they believe, and some of them probably do have, the cause might be good, how they do it might not necessarily be good, but the cause might be good. I wish they would attack the wealthy and the rich. I shouldn't say that because that's not good, but, like, look, and they could be, it could be anything from revenge to just, hey, let's see if I want to be able to go, hey, aren't I so good? I managed to hack this and get that. Could be for money. It could be for secrets. It could be for manipulation of people. Like, I mean, if you don't, do something, I'm going to reveal this information about you or whatever. I mean, so I think, as I said, like, attackers' motives and goals are going to be complicated, and I think it's important when you're coming to ethical hacking to understand that there are complex motives and complex goals. Sometimes they might just want to exfiltrate, which means take out data out of the system. Sometimes they might want to encrypt and demand payment, as called ransomware. Sometimes they might want to go around and see what, like, they don't want to take out data, but they want to see what, damaging or other information they can find about individuals or the company as a whole. They might want to get company secrets. They might want to put a company off the air to stop it from competing. They, as I said, might want to take down another nation state. I mean, so I think it's important to understand that attackers' goals and motives are very complex, and we need to understand that they're different. And the techniques and the methods and the tools they use could be anything from simple to extremely complex. And we need to have some sort of understanding of what these tools are, how they're used, and what people do with them, and like we also need to understand, like, pretty much, like, I am very far from being an expert in cybersecurity. I am just about to finish my diploma of cybersecurity. And I'm looking at maybe doing the degree in cybersecurity next. I'm not sure, but we need to always tell people that you need to assume at all times a data breach. And what we're saying, assume you're going to be hacked. Because like almost every person and every company, you're going to be hacked at some point. I'm not saying that's good because it's not, but you just got to assume it. So we sort of go, okay, assume you're going to get, hacked in some way or form, right? So assume that. So we're going to then say we should also have what's called zero trust architecture. We shouldn't trust anything on the internet or within networks at all. We should constantly require people to authenticate who they are, all that sort of stuff, authorization, we need to constantly be checking people who are who they say they are. That we also need to make sure that people don't have privileges they don't need. So if you're just a person at home, whatever, like, use complex passwords, and I mean use special characters like exclamation marks, at symbols, whatever. Use numbers, capital letters. I would say 12 characters minimum. Use password managers. I would suggest very strongly use some kind of VPN, okay? Because otherwise your information can be everywhere. Make sure you use browsers that encrypt. Put protections on your browsers, put protection as best you can on your email. And I'm going to talk about how to do all of this in other videos, but like for companies need to do this as well. And like you can get password managers, because if you're anything like me who couldn't remember a password, if, like to save myself, don't write them down. Definitely don't tell people. But password managers, you want these password managers in themselves to be encrypted and secure and locked behind multiple levels of security. But use password managers, okay, at least then, and change your password regularly. I mean, I'd say probably every 40 days, roughly, I would change passwords. And you could use passphrases as well, like that mean something to you but to no one else. I mean, don't use names of kids or parents or dogs or whatever. And I think it's really, really important that people understand like basics of, like, the more popular browsers like Chrome and Microsoft Bing and Firefox and all of that, Opera, and others, they have controls that you can go into network and security. And I would generally recommend that you suggest, like in where it says in these browsers, where it says network and security, to set this on maximum. Unless you know what you're doing, then I would set it on maximum security. You can also get it to scan for harmful content and images if you've got children. I mean, I'm going to say you can have net nannies and all that sort of stuff, and they're not a bad idea. But even so, if you've got particularly, younger children, or even children of any age, under maybe the age of 14 or so, or even then, under the age maybe of 16 on the internet, you need to be seeing what they're doing, if they're doing homework or whatever, using hopefully a very safe messaging chat to talk to their friends. You need to be seeing what they're doing, because, like, kids are uniquely vulnerable and uniquely targeted. So look, you want to obviously not, be overly authoritarian, but you also got to just say, you got to teach kids how to be safe online. And if you don't know how to be safe online, how can you possibly teach them? And I mean, also, kids like to explore. Kids are curious, and kids aren't always going to do what they're told. Like any human, like kids are, just younger humans. So, and I mean, I think expecting obedience all the time is absurd and ridiculous. But, like, I think having some protections in place, and just say to kids, look, I want to be, at least if they're looking at homework, teach them how to search and research safely and without, if they can help it, using AI all that much. I'm not saying don't use it at all, but there's issues around AI. And a lot of kids are being targeted through AI now, which I don't like. I think that's very harmful and scary. We've got to teach them how to critically think. How do we check information is real? And it's getting increasingly difficult with all these deep fakes and blah, blah, blah going around to detect what is real and what's not. So, look, with when it comes to ethical hacking, if, like, whether it's just, you should always only ever do this with permission, whether you're doing this as a sole person helping out other people or companies, only ever with permission and written permission, exactly what you're going to do and why. Now, attackers, as I said, like, we need to understand what they're doing, why, how they do it. And we need to understand and transmit this information so that, look, the internet is a thing, networks exist. Now, there's good things and bad things about it. I mean, I don't think we're going to ever become unplugged, as to say, completely. We do need to spend more time being unplugged, but I don't think we can unplug completely at this point. But there's obviously dangers and harms in terms of security. I mean, we shouldn't be spreading people's personal information or anything else all over the internet. Like, it's just not. I think we need to find better ways. So look, I just wanted to go through that, but I will end this video here, and hopefully this has been helpful. Thank you.